Alright, I need to preface this review slash thoughts after I fully recorded the audio for it. This is long. You guys probably saw the time, and this is ridiculously long for review slash thoughts. So if you already know what XCOM 2 or the XCOM series looks like as far as visually, please feel free to just download the audio for this and listen to it podcast style, because this one's gonna get long. And if you're just wondering, you know, is it worth buying? Should I buy it? Quick summary before we dip into all of this that I'm about to tell you. Yes, it's absolutely worth buying if you're a fan of turn-based strategy or the XCOM series in general, although the price is a little bit steep for what it adds, and if you're someone who doesn't play Iron Man style, I think you might be a little disappointed with the amount of content it adds if you get War of the Chosen. Now, if the price goes down below 40 bucks, wow, you need to buy this right now, it's so good. Alright, we now continue with the regular review slash thoughts. Welcome, everyone, to the ridiculously long overdue review of XCOM 2 and, of course, the new expansion pack, War of the Chosen. For those of you who watched both LPs, this has been a long time coming, because I played the base game way back when it came out. This is a direct sequel to Firaxis' reboot of the series with XCOM Enemy Unknown / Enemy Within. This is gonna be a review. It might go on a little bit longer than usual because I want to talk about the base game and what War of the Chosen adds, and kind of if it's worth it for you to get into War of the Chosen and the base game in general. I'm also gonna assume that you know a little bit about how these games play. I'm not gonna go over every little detail, but a brief overview. It's a turn-based strategy game that is one part base management and another part turn-based, move troops around the battlefield to tactical positions and have them fire and win out over incredibly bad odds, because this is XCOM, baby. The odds are stacked against you. And so the base premise of XCOM in general is that aliens come to Earth, they invade, and it's up to the secret organization formed from all the countries known as XCOM to fight back against the struggle. Except in XCOM 2. See, the interesting part that I really like about the story shift from Enemy Unknown / Enemy Within, which I'm just going to refer to as Enemy Within at this point, is that rather than being this super secret organization formed from all the governments with all the best resources mankind has available to fight back against the aliens, this is a scenario where the aliens won. They took over Earth, and now you are a small resistance sect fighting back. You are the guerrilla fighters striking back at the aliens to try and turn the tide after the general populace they've given up, it's over, and the aliens won. It's a really, really neat change from the last game. For those of you who don't know, this is a direct sequel, despite the fact that when you win an Enemy Within, it's kind of like XCOM 1, hooray, we pushed them back. But this is still a direct sequel, and they have a really clever way of essentially having the outcome be you lose, while still making the first game canon in such a way, and I won't spoil that. But there's that. The story is nothing super spectacular. It's what you'd expect from a game like this. It is interesting. I think the characters are more interesting than anything. You have a new researcher, a new engineer, and of course Bradford is back in all of his sweater vest glory, although I'm trying to remember, I don't know if he actually wears a sweater vest in this game, but he does reference it. And basically the commander comes back and it's you've got to turn the tide. Now there's a lot of structural things that remain the same with the first XCOM, with Enemy Within, and that is there's still kind of a anthill design in your ship, but it's a lot less planned than it was before. In Enemy Within, they wanted you to build facilities next to each other for big bonuses, and that's less evident here. There's not as much of that, and it's more build where you can, and I kind of like that more because it allows for a little more free flow design. It's less worrisome to have to think about that kind of stuff. There's a ton of quality of life changes. You have to forgive me because it's been a long time since I played Enemy Within, and even base XCOM 2, I might mistake some things that were in the base XCOM 2 that I say were new to the War of the Chosen. It's just been a while. But there are a lot of nice things in XCOM 2 that I think really make a big difference. For example, rather than building multiple of the same kind of gun, when you upgrade, you just purchase the upgrade outright, and all of those base level guns get upgraded for everyone. No more building multiple things. I think the classes are more diverse. I think there's a lot more choice and a lot more arguments for picking sides of the skill tree when you level soldiers up. Although some classes are still clearly have a better option at times, there are times where it's tougher compared to Enemy Within, where it was always pretty obvious which one is probably more useful. The classes themselves have been revamped just a tish. Sniper's pretty close to the same. The Specialist is basically the guy with the little robot. He's gonna hack things. He's your medic. That didn't change too much. The Ranger now gets a sword, and we're coming back to like the Terror from the Deep days when melee became a thing and it was all fresh and new. And well, to be honest, in base XCOM 2 it really isn't all that great. You have to work really hard to get the swords even moderately useful, and even then the shotgun is almost always a better option, so it's a little bit disappointing. And finally the Grenadier, with all of its explosiveness glory of grenades. It's a good mix, and you want a good mix of everything on your team. The Psi units return, and they are ridiculously powerful this go around. And overall, I really like the unit structure a lot more in XCOM 2 compared to the original game. Now, one interesting aspect is that since you're guerrilla fighters now, you're not really answering to a council. And so rather than trying to protect the entire world and have this council where the doom counter ticks up there, you now have a different time requirement known as the Avatar Project, and it's an interesting way to keep you from turtling and just researching and not really progressing in the game. Essentially, over time, you'll get ticks on a meter at the top, and when it gets full, a final countdown timer happens. You might have 10 days to remove some of those ticks, or it's instant game over. And it's a good motivator to keep you going in the game. It can be really harrowing at times. Right now, I'm strictly talking base XCOM 2, before War of the Chosen. And I think it's a good shift from the council before, because the council was it's almost impossible to keep everyone happy and you're going to get some ticks. This is something you can manage, and it forces you to proceed further with the story to remove ticks a lot of times. And in the beginning of the game, it can be pretty harrowing to have that tick up and then go into that final countdown mode if you're not monitoring it well enough, and you gotta go on some crazy missions. I should have mentioned at the very beginning, this is all from the perspective of a person who plays on hard difficulty, like one notch below the hardest, and I play Iron Man style. I think that's really important, actually, because I think you can have wildly different experiences with this game depending on whether, and I'm not saying save scumming's bad or anything, I just think your thoughts on the game would be a lot different. So yeah, you have to tackle objectives more frequently than you did before. The actual gameplay itself is an improvement across the board from the original game, I'd say. There's a brand new conceal mechanic where at the start of most missions, all of your units will be in this concealed state, which allows them to move around freely and not provoke aliens as long as you don't get too close to them or smash through a window or kick down a door, something that would make a lot of noise. It allows you to get into position for your first encounter, because a problem that Enemy Within had is that the way enemies work in this game is they just kind of mosey about until they see you, at which point they get aggroed and they come at you. So in Enemy Within, you had this problem of always having to tiptoe forward because you don't want them to get aggroed on your last soldier's turn, and so you tiptoe forward. And then a really good strategy was to just walk back and overwatch, which essentially allows you to take a pot shot at the enemy on the enemy's turn. That's kind of fixed pretty well with the conceal mechanic. It allows you to be aggressive early on and skip past some of that tediousness of tiptoeing forward, because you can run forward, get into position, scout things out, see where the enemies are at, and once you take that first shot, conceal goes off and you're free from there. It speeds the game up a lot and adds up a lot of tactical different strategies. I think something a lot of people get confused, and I see this crop up so much, is this isn't a stealth mechanic. This isn't meant to get you all the way to the objective without encountering a single enemy, and I think that that confuses a lot of people. I see a lot of people complain, well, why would they even have this stealth mechanic if I can't even make it all the way there, and then it's like the enemies just home in on me and they just sit there and I can't do anything. It's like, that's not what it's for. It was designed to fix a very specific problem in the original game, and I think it's brilliant at that, and it's probably the best new feature in the game, I would say. The other new feature that I personally enjoy, that I think is very controversial, incredibly controversial, is the turn timers. XCOM 2 introduced the turn timers into a significant majority of its guerrilla missions. Essentially, you'll be plopped down, and you got to make it all the way to the objective or do your objective within so many turns. What this does is it forces you to play aggressive. It forces you to think about your actions not only in terms of surviving against the aliens, but also getting there in time. And this fixes the other problem I said earlier, which is that a winning strategy in Enemy Within was to aggro the aliens and then just fall back out of their line of sight and put everyone into Overwatch, at which point you take all your pot shots and you'll probably kill a few of them and deal with them fast. You can't really do that here. You don't have the time for it. And I say controversial because, well, I think it's a pretty good solution. It's not a perfect solution, mind you, but it's a pretty good solution to a problem that was in the original game. The problem is a lot of people get really scared by the turn timers, and it turned a lot of people off at launch. You would go to forums and you'd see a lot of people saying, man, these turn timers are impossible. I don't know how you get past them. And some people just couldn't wrap their head around how aggressive you had to play to get there in time. Now, the good thing is that XCOM 2 has mod support built in from the get-go. Yeah, it's all Steam Workshop, it's all right there, and there's plenty of mods that'll turn those turn timers off for you if you want, or even get rid of things like the Avatar Project Instant Game Over timer if you really care. There's mods for just about everything, to be honest. In fact, Long War 2 officially supported. For those of you who don't know, Long War is a very celebrated mod in the XCOM community for these newer games. So the turn timers I personally love. The thing where they can become a bit problematic is another new feature that I think is a fantastic addition to XCOM 2, but sometimes doesn't gel perfectly with the turn timers, is that every tactical battle map is procedurally generated. Very similar to the original XCOM, actually. And so, while Enemy Within had these static maps, they were always the same, you just load into one of them, and so at times you could maybe see the same map twice in one playthrough. It got kind of weird. Now everything is procedurally generated, and there's that random element. The problem is sometimes the game can't really factor in the perfect amount of turns it should give you to get to that objective, and it can be really challenging. I'm not going to say that it's a really big problem, but it's never been a huge problem for me, but at the same time, I'm not going to go and say something ridiculous, say that it's not going to create a map that might be damn near impossible to win. It would happen extremely rarely at best, but could happen. Overall, I still like the change, though, and I personally think the turn timers breathe new life into this style of game. So yeah, XCOM 2, it's really hard to say much else other than it's a direct improvement in almost every way from Enemy Within. In fact, it really makes Enemy Within look very outdated by comparison, and it's almost hard to go back to with how basic it is. XCOM 2 opens up so many more options. There's a lot more active abilities to use for soldiers. There's a lot more cool items, such as the Mimic Beacon or various ammo types to equip, which add a lot of variety. The mission variety is far stronger. The base management is better. It's just hard to think of things that don't work as well. So honestly, if you're into these type of strategy games, similar to the old XCOM Jagged Alliance 2, where you're commanding troops, bouncing from cover to cover, trying to find tactical positions, you need to get this game. It's a blast. It's not perfect. It has its issues, and I'll get into those at the end. But it's good enough to where I can recommend it to most people that are interested in strategy games like this. So with that said, let's jump over to some of the DLCs. Now, I'm not even going to talk about Anarchy's Children because it's just cosmetic stuff, and it's pretty subpar at best in my mind. It just turns everyone into Mad Max, really. But the next major one is the Alien Rulers, I think, came out first. And the Alien Rulers will add a couple of extra bosses to fight and a couple of new weapons that are more powerful over the standard ones, generally speaking. The bosses are a cool dynamic in that once you activate that mission, they could show up on any mission after that. And to be honest, I'm not a super fan. I think the bosses are designed to be roughly as cheap as possible, and I think this kind of compensates. In general, XCOM 2 definitely feels easier than Enemy Within to me, and I think it has something to do with all the options you have for every situation. This is coming from a guy who plays Iron Man. It only took my second run of playing on, you know, hard difficulty before I succeeded, and I succeeded pretty hard. These bosses add a new difficulty element in that they are hard to take down if you don't know what you're doing. In fact, they will almost certainly clobber you the first time. But once you take them down, you get access to even more powerful stuff that'll let you stomp the game further. It's a cool little DLC, but I don't know if I'd make it a priority to get. The next one is Shen's Last Gift, and by the way, both of these DLCs add little story missions about, you know, some of your scientist and engineer from the first game, basically, from Enemy Within. So the second one is Shen's Last Gift, and essentially it just gives you a new class type, which is the Spark. Similar to Enemy Within, it's a robotic unit that does what you want it to do. It can't be healed, but it shoots big old gun and can go into overdrive and shoot 3 times in one turn. Honestly, it's not a very good unit type in the base game. There's a lot of things missing. You can't throw weapon mods on their weapons, or really their aim isn't what it should be. So it's a cool story DLC, though. That's probably my favorite of the story DLCs, for the story missions. And so, let's get into War of the Chosen, shall we? Because War of the Chosen does change a lot of stuff. It changes a lot. It's difficult, and in fact, I'm surprised, you know, I talked about XCOM 2 as much as I did, because the meat of these changes is going to be War of the Chosen. It's filled with things that I never knew I wanted, but I can't live without now. First things first, there's a lot of cool aesthetic things, such as resistance style, like guerrilla warfare posters of like, fight back, and it'll do poses with your soldiers after victories and all sorts of stuff, and I'm a sucker for that. Even if you don't want to like micromanage and pick the poses, if you just hit randomize, you'll get some cool stuff that everyone's doing. And there's also a new bond mechanic where soldiers, you can pair up soldiers, and if they fight together enough, they will essentially bro out and they can do bonuses with each other. None of the bonuses are ever that extreme, but it's a nice little touch, because let's be honest, if you're playing XCOM, you're naming all your soldiers and you're getting attached to them, and when they die spectacularly, you get really sad. It's the awesome little touches like that like really hit home this resistance, like guerrilla fighting. And that's something, I don't know if I really struck home, but they do a really good job of theming that you are the resistance, you're fighting back against these aliens. It's clear you're the one that's outnumbered and outmatched, and you're trying to fight against impossible odds. So the other cool changes, these are mechanic changes. We haven't even gotten to the big ones yet. But the other one is a will system where you can now see your soldiers, like, you can think of it like stamina, basically. You can actually see where it's at mid-battle now through a bar, and it's important because soldiers will now get tired. They have to recover their will after missions by basically not sending them out on missions for a while. And the really cool thing about this aspect is you now can't bring your A-team to every mission, because units get tired easily enough to where you gotta rotate people in, and so it gets hectic sometimes. You can't always bring your best soldiers to every mission, and it helps keep a good, healthy rotation of soldiers in the mix. It's a really nice touch that boggles my mind why it wasn't implemented earlier, and it adds so much to the variety of soldiers, because you can't always have what you want. The other big changes are 3 new hero classes. These are units that you'll likely only get 1 of each, but you can get more in rare circumstances. And they're each powerful in their own ways. There's the Reapers. They have the power to be generally broken and overpowered. No, I'm kidding. They have a super form of Conceal that makes the enemy extremely hard to notice them, and all of their actions generally revolve around stealth and scouting the enemy out, which is incredibly powerful in a game like this. The next unit type is a Templar, and they are almost purely melee based. That is their focus, and they have a ton of wacky sort of psi abilities to damage the aliens or do wacky things there. It's mostly cool for running up and bringing out psi blades and hitting someone in the face. It's one of my favorite units aesthetic wise. And the final hero class is the Skirmisher. It's a highly mobile unit that can grapple to high up places, move far distances, and it can shoot twice in one turn if it wants to. It's unfortunately probably the most underwhelming of the three. It seems very powerful at first, but a lot of the abilities focus on Overwatch stuff, and there's just not a ton of time for Overwatch stuff with the turn timers. Now that said, speaking of turn timers, it is clear that Firaxis heard the people's complaints. It wasn't my complaints, but they heard most people's complaints. Turn timers are drastically toned down in War of the Chosen. I don't know if you guys noticed when you were watching the LP, but think of how few times we had turn timer missions compared to the base game. Base game, I'd say the vast majority of missions were turn timer. Now, turn timer missions in War of the Chosen are the exception, and they're significantly easier because you have time, you have ways to basically give yourself turns back. The turn timers in War of the Chosen were never even close to threatening. They gave you way more time than you should, and I think it's a kind of a misstep, to be honest. That's not to say that the new objectives that they introduced were bad by any means. In fact, some of them were very, very cool, such as eliminate the enemy commander, and once you break concealment, the enemy commander starts freaking out and tries to evac, and you gotta get rid of him in time. That's a cool mechanic. The new hero units are generally a great addition to the game. They add a lot, but they are also extremely powerful. So powerful, in fact, that they added an entirely new AP system. Yeah, you can generate AP into a pool, and soldiers will also get AP upon leveling up. And what does the AP do for you? Well, you can now get a whole bunch of different abilities from basically both sides of the skill tree. That the hero classes have a bunch of different abilities to get, but then for regular XCOM soldiers, you can get all the abilities from both sides of the skill tree you want with relatively little AP cost. Also, whereas before we had the Advanced Warfare Center in the base game, which I really did not like as a mechanic, not because and essentially what this does is if you have that facility built, every unit has a chance to be generated and have a hidden ability at some point in their career path. And if you don't have the Advanced Warfare Center built, by the time you hit that ability, you just miss out on it. And these are abilities that are from other classes that can make for really powerful unit combinations. And so you usually had to be really dumb and spend all your resources immediately on the Advanced Warfare Center so that you didn't miss out on any of that. And even after that, it was all random. And it just didn't feel... I mean, I love randomness, but it just... tactically, it was kind of dumb. So now, with the AP system, you can still get stuff like that, and you can get up to like 3 or 4 different options. I'm gonna be honest, guys. They probably let you become a little bit too powerful. Grossly overpowered. While I like the idea of an AP system in general like this that allows you to get more abilities, I think it was a misstep allowing you to get both sides of the general skill tree for regular soldiers. And let me tell you why. Remember how I said one of my favorite parts is that they make you have to make choices on your level ups in the base game. There was actually some hard decisions, and you might have actually had soldiers split off into different roles. You might have had one guy be the pistol guy for your snipers, or a different guy be the sniper one. You might have specialized in swords as your shotgun guy and said, you know what, I'm not going to use shotguns as much. I want to focus on swords and try and make them as good as possible. All that's thrown out the window here, and it doesn't feel right. By the end of the game, there was no thought process to the skills. I was like, well, I'll just get this one for now because I can get whatever I want later. They're so cheap. It's so cheap to get the other skills that it's really inconsequential. And to be able to get some of the really hard decisions, for example, you used to really have to make a decision whether you wanted your specialist to be a medic or a combat person who, you know, struck down mechanical enemies. But you can have both now. You can have a medic, you can have that medic role at the same time as a badass. It's just, it doesn't feel right. It feels like a lot of the strategy of that is taken out. And maybe this is just me. I feel like a lot of people love making the super soldier units, but it truly did make the game much easier. That said, I think the AP system works perfect for the new 3 hero class units because they do not have standard level ups and they get all of their abilities through spending AP. Now, on top of all of this, we have, I mean, these are all just general mechanic changes. We have 3 new boss enemies, and added into the story, essentially, These boss units will harass you at random times throughout missions in their territory. They each specialize in a completely different thing. One is quick and agile with a melee attack, another is a psi unit, and another is a long-range sniper type. They all want XCOM dead, and they will all do various things throughout the month, whether it be increasing their own power to be more deadly in the next encounter, or generally disrupting your activities. In general, I like these new boss enemies. Unlike alien rulers, they don't feel ridiculously cheap. There's a good challenge, and I like fighting them. I really do. It's, for the most part, mostly early game. They add a nice variety in the story of them being introduced and the elders having these 3 chosen ones that are basically fighting to kill XCOM so they get control over Earth as their prize. It's a really cool thing, but that felt like the story just got thrown out of the window. Like, I get one more cutscene when I kill the first one, and after that it's just kind of really not brought up again. I think they're a great addition. I think their missions to actually kill each one are not the best planned out because it's scripted story missions, which this game has a couple of, and unfortunately they're just not as interesting because once you know how it works the first time, it's just kind of busy work after that, it feels like. Now, another one of the new mechanics that I really think is I just gotta give a shout out to this mechanic because I think it's brilliant in solving a problem that was in the basically all of the previous XCOM games, in that your research path, once you know what you're doing in future playthroughs, it's pretty solid. You know what to research first, you know what's important. And they added this new mechanic called breakthroughs, where you need to act immediately. You say, I want to research this or it's gone. And the breakthroughs are genuinely enticing enough to where it's going to disrupt your standard research path. Something as small as +1 damage with all pistols is a huge boost, especially early game. But it's going to delay you from that all-important, tier 2 weapon upgrade or armor upgrade early on. And so you got to make that call. Is it worth waiting? Is it worth the permanent +1 damage? Or do you just got to stay on track and not get distracted by these bonuses? It's a really cool solution. It's a perfect solution to a problem that's existed in this series for a long time, and I fully believe that this is a mechanic that will flow into the next game. It's very smart. It's a very, very nice touch. Oh yeah, and one more mechanic is the 3 hero units all represent different factions, and so you can assign bonuses similar to how the newer Civ games work. You can assign little bonus cards to various factions, and so one of them might be like +3 power to the Avenger, or even some that affect battle, such as enemies that hit you with psi attacks take feedback damage. With all of these new bonuses, and the covert ops actually can grant permanent stat boosts, which is absurd because some of them are like dodge and mobility and crap. It is really easy to make a super soldier in this game. And so, with all of these things to make you overpowered, obviously the Chosen are there to balance that out, to add that extra difficulty, and we also have some new aliens thrown in. And I can't believe I didn't talk about the aliens. Okay, so the alien designs, I actually don't know if I like as much as the base XCOM, or as much as Enemy Within. Enemy Within had this very cartoony aesthetic, I'm gonna say. The graphics weren't cartoony, but the alien designs were, and it really harkened back to those old XCOM days where everything was like very comic booky. And I really appreciated that, and everything looks much more realistic now. Much more, the sectoids are like very tall, standing on 2 legs, rather than these short little gray people. And so I will say the enemy variety and their abilities are far cooler. They can do a lot more things. They have a lot more options. The problem is probably the most uninspired alien type, which is the regular Advent. Advent being the peacekeeping group patrolling over Earth. Very generic, like, alien soldier looking guys that look very human and probably the least interesting to fight. I play XCOM for the wild and wacky aliens, baby. I want to see some psi slinging. I want to see some giant frickin' monster chrysalid thing hit my enemy in the stomach and impregnate him with a super chrysalid. That's still here, but a lot of the goons are regular Advent goons. They show up every mission. They're the units that get dropped off the most, and sometimes I miss the wild and wacky alien designs. That's what XCOM's all about. What's here is still really cool. I don't want to, I don't want to let that point not stand. But sometimes I miss the old designs a little bit. But generally, the aliens are varied, and you got all your XCOM classics. You got the sectoids and the mutons and the sectopods that are just giant, you know, the freaking two-legged things from Star Wars practically at this point. So, the new enemy types, in general, my biggest problem with the enemies is that sometimes they're just really dumb. Like the sectoid has the power to mind control, but he rarely uses it, and instead will often make a psi zombie. Or the shield bearer will have a chance to kill a unit, but instead he'll be like, now's the perfect time to put up shields after everyone's dead. It's really easy to abuse enemy AI, predictably, because they'll almost always shoot at the guy that is most easy to see, and you can just set your units up that are the tanks to just absorb everything, and they'll be big dumb idiots. So with the new units introduced, we have the Purifier, which is a little bit of like a flamethrower guy. Generally not threatening at all. In fact, sometimes he just makes fire and doesn't hit anyone. I don't really know what they were thinking about this unit. This is more of a story unit than anything to coincide with another enemy type that was introduced, and this is the Lost. Now, the Lost is it's a zombie. Let's not split hairs. It's a zombie. It's zombie humans. They show up fairly frequently. Now, they follow pretty typical zombie rules. Explosions will draw more of them. They can attack either you or Advent. And generally, they're not really damage sponges. And here's the thing. Early on, the Lost seemed like a very cool mechanic. I was all into it because it seemed like a nice twist. The problem is they're so easy to kill, and every time you kill one, they give you a free turn, that it's just kind of mashing fire to kill all of them, and it's just kind of a grind after a while. They pose next to no threat if you are even semi-competent at the game. I think I was punched by them a total of once or twice. Maybe twice. And the thing is it makes Advent act like a bunch of big dumb idiots too, because now they're going to take their turns to do something stupid like attack the Lost rather than me. And so it furthers that whole, makes the game a little bit easier because Advent can just be big dumb idiots sometimes. So honestly, the Lost were a cool inclusion early game, but late game they were a little bit tedious. Probably the biggest wasted potential in the game, I would think. And I kind of dreaded any time they showed up because it just made the mission drag on. The next unit type, the Advent Priest, is a much needed unit actually. I think this unit was very needed and missing from the first game because there's a distinct lack of psi units without them. You have the sectoid early game, and then like practically nothing until near end game in the base game, in like original XCOM 2. So there's like a distinct lack of psi units for an XCOM game, which is very like, I want to be bullshitted by getting mind controlled sometimes, you know? That's XCOM, baby. It filled a nice role. The problem with the Priest is this is where they started giving the enemies a bit too many abilities that require a human brain to use. Specifically, I'm referring to stasis. I think I saw Advent Priests waste enough turns stasising either something incredibly pointless like a zombie or me to give me a tactical advantage to know that they should have never given that ability so that the priest can actually be useful. In fact, in general, the AI is not where it should be. The enemies just act dumb way too often given their abilities. And in fact, a lot of times their special abilities are the least threatening at all. Of all. And I'm not going to spoil too much. Those are the earliest game enemies. In general, some of the enemy types that War of the Chosen added are very cool, but at the same time aren't going to knock your socks off, barring one enemy. There's one new enemy type that shows up fairly frequently. It's a cool one. See, yeah, in general, the biggest problem with these games, as you might have been tell that I'm building up to, is that the reverse difficulty curve still stands, and it gets doubled in War of the Chosen. Now, what do I mean? You might be saying, reverse difficulty curve, what does that mean? Reverse difficulty, a standard game gets more difficult as you progress, as it starts out low to ease you in, and as time goes on, the game gets more challenging. It makes sense, that's the difficulty curve. An inverse difficulty curve goes the opposite way. The game starts out challenging, it's It's a fight for your life. It's every tactical decision counts. As time goes on, you're going to hit that moment where if things are going well for you, if you don't have too many setbacks, you're going to be so much more powerful than the aliens. You just start rolling over them. You're too far ahead in tech, you're too far ahead in level ups, and nothing hurts you, and it is doubled in War of the Chosen. It is even worse than usual because you can get all the abilities you want through the AP system. You have a ton of new abilities and equipment, and after you kill the Chosen, you get even more OP equipment. And after you kill the Chosen, you're really left with the base game. They didn't really tweak anything for that. The final mission was harrowing for me the first time through. The final mission, War of the Chosen, was a joke. It wasn't even a contest. It was over in probably the shortest number of turns it could have been, and I don't think a single person got injured. It really goes to show how all of these new additions really just break that difficulty curve further. And it's a problem that's always going to be tough to solve in these kinds of games because this is where it comes down to. You're balancing for two kinds of players. You're balancing for me, which is the Iron Man style. And honestly, that's kind of almost what you have to balance for because it takes into account that I might have setbacks. I'm going to have a mission where I get squad wiped, and I am going to be set back huge. But I don't want that to be the run ender. I don't want the game to be over off of that. I want to fight on and see, pull out of those tough times. And so the game has to allow a little bit of wiggle room for that. It has to allow for a little bit of wiggle room to take the wrong research path and not hit that next level of weapon upgrades as fast as an optimal player would. At the same time, a player who doesn't play Iron Man and is going to reload if a soldier dies or if something bad happens, but now all of a sudden you're so far ahead, even more so than usual, because the game is balanced to have a few setbacks occasionally, and you're just rolling through everything and you're going to get bored. It's a tough problem to balance for. How do you really fix that? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. It's not something so bad that I would say don't play the game because of it, but it's something to keep in mind because I think I speak for a lot of veterans of these games when I say that once you get max rank people and you get the final tier of weapon and armor research, you basically won the game. You don't really have to play anymore because nothing will probably challenge you the rest of it. And I actually see this come up a lot for people. I've seen topics on boards that discuss the game and people say, yeah, honestly, when I hit that point, I just stopped playing because it's not fun for me anymore. I know I won. I got past the most fun part of the game, which is the struggle. And so it's a tough problem to solve. It's something I wish they'd solve in the next game. In general, despite all of the cons I just said, they're all small nitpicks because I do gotta critique this. This is a franchise I love dearly, and it's only fair that I critique it as such. I think another misstep was the Avatar project. It is so easy through covert ops now to just stop the timer. It's unreal. It's really a non-issue, and I think that's a misstep. It allows you to turtle super hard in War of the Chosen. But overall, did I like War of the Chosen? Were the changes good? Oh my god. It's an amazing expansion for people like me. It's the definitive way to play XCOM 2 now. I don't think I could go back to the base game, despite the thing of it making it a little bit too easy at times. For reference, I was able to beat the entire game on my first run on that difficulty, on Iron Man style, and that's a little bit disappointing to some degree. It's a little bit too easy, but damn it if the new changes aren't really fun. The Chosen are fun to fight against. It adds a lot more unique variety to repeat playthroughs, and it adds nice little touches like the bond mechanic and the whale mechanic. The new hero classes are super fun to use. To be honest, the struggle up until that reverse difficulty curve is a blast, and it will challenge you. It's a fun game. It's the way to play XCOM 2. Now, I'm not saying the base game isn't fun. In fact, you could play the base game and have a blast with all the changes in War of the Chosen. But here's the thing. It's a $40 expansion. I have no regrets. I love this franchise. I love this type of game. But that's a big price point for an expansion. of this nature, and doubly so because it doesn't include any of the previous DLCs, which I think is a gigantic misstep for Axis. To not include those other ones for free is rough, because I think those are kind of integral. You even rebalanced the game for them. You rebalanced them for War of the Chosen, but they don't even come with War of the Chosen. I think it's a tough pill to swallow if you're not really into these kinds of games. I do think it's absolutely worth playing through. I think War of the Chosen's a fantastic upgrade. And I think this is where it comes down to. And I actually see this complaint a lot. I saw it a lot with Enemy Within as well, when Enemy Within came out. A lot of people are going to think the content is very front-loaded. They're going to be done with the Chosen. They'll kill the Chosen off super early, and they're going to say, well, wow, that wasn't worth $40. And the problem is if you don't, and this isn't to say like, oh, you suck if you save scum, or that's the wrong way to play. You play however you want to play. The problem is if you do that, you reload and you have everything go perfect, you're going to kill the Chosen super early, and all that you're really left with at that point is the regular game with a few mechanic tweaks, and you're going to wonder where the $40 went. It's tough to recommend. I think if you're like me and you play Iron Man, it's the perfect length. It's tough to kill the Chosen to where you can't do it early enough. They're going to fight you throughout the game. But if you don't play Iron Man, you're probably going to wipe the floor with them super early and wonder why this costs $40 and where all the new content is. And the new content is the struggle early on. It's tough. I want to say go out and buy War of the Chosen right now. It's totally worth it. It's the best new way to play XCOM 2, and it totally gives XCOM 2 worth another playthrough. $40 without the other DLC, it's tough to recommend. And I generally don't talk about price in reviews, because I think a good time, sometimes you can't put a price on a good time. But this, it's a little bit like that. The last thing I want to mention is, for these games, is that there is a new challenge mode, which I think is a fantastic addition. We've seen a lot of games do this in recent years. Essentially, it's a leaderboard style score attack. If you've played Binding of Isaac, the new Binding of Isaac games, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Each day there's a pre-made scenario that everyone in the world can play, and then you play out that combat scenario and try and get the best score you can, and then you do leaderboards. I think it's a really cool way to turn the game on each day and, you know, get thrown into a situation. Sometimes your squads will be entirely alien based, and it's pretty fun to get to play around with their abilities outside the main game. It's a nice little feature. I love that they added it. The other thing about these games is that they do have multiplayer. There's not a ton to be said here. It is fun if you're playing with a friend, but I would never take it seriously. Do not go in expecting this to be competitive in any way. Some people might disagree with me on that, but generally it's pretty unbalanced and broken. You make a team of various pre-made soldier types and aliens based on point values with a maximum point value per each team, and then you just go at it. The problem is the conceal mechanic can be a little bit janky in multiplayer, and generally it breaks things a little, you know. It allows you to set up some stupid ambushes for the enemy, and it's fun. Don't get me wrong, it's fun when played with a friend, but I would never take it that serious. So yeah, boy, this went on super long. Holy crap, is that... Oh my god, that's 45 minutes. Woo! I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is way too long. Oh well, that's fine. I had a lot to talk about. I really love XCOM, and at the very least, XCOM 2 is cheaper than War of the Chosen, funnily enough, usually at this point, and can be had for a reasonable price, and it's absolutely worth playing. If you're really loving it, do another playthrough in War of the Chosen, or if you just love this franchise, you didn't even realize War of the Chosen came out, get it! It's fun. Now, one thing I do want to talk about is kind of my hopes and what I want to see in the next XCOM, because I think it is important to discuss a little bit. The first big one is they're still relying on this pod system where aliens kind of mosey about until they catch a glimpse of an XCOM soldier, at which point they get aggroed and come after you. It's worked really well for these first two games of the reboot, to a degree, but at the same time, I think you're pretty tapped out on strategies and new cool things that you can do with this style of game. To be honest, it's feeling a little bit routine, and it's very easy to manipulate, and it feels like a lot of the strategy and what they expect you to do is just manipulating how this really functions. Essentially, you just tiptoe forward until you aggro one enemy pod, and you try and deal with that one before running too far ahead and accidentally aggroing another group of like 3 enemies. It's kind of annoying, and it doesn't even really make much sense in context, because you can have these Advent soldiers here watching their alien buddies. I mean, their alien buddies are within sight, and they can see them shooting at something, and they're like, oh, that's just Bill just shooting at rocks again. Bet XCOM isn't over there. And they only freak out once they see you. I know this mechanic is done. I can tell it's done to have a controlled environment and reduce the air quotes amount of bullshit that happens in the game, because people get really mad when bullshit deaths happen, but honestly, that's part of XCOM. There's already a lot of random chance here. There are going to be times where you get screwed over by RNG, and that's part of the fun of the game. It makes it exciting. I know some people aren't into that, but I would really like to see a system similar to the original XCOM implemented, where when you break conceal or when you jump in, I want to see all the enemies acting in the shadows. I want to see them know that XCOM is there. Very similar to the first game, where the aliens are doing things. They're moving around even when they don't see you, and they're getting ready to maybe flank you or do something other than absolutely nothing at all, because it's right now it feels like a lot of the game and strategy is around manipulating enemy AI. And while there is strategy in that, and it can be fun, it just seems like we've done that for both games now, and clearly by the end of War of the Chosen you'll realize that once you learn how to do that, there isn't much more strategy to be had. And I think switching it up to that style would not only make the game a lot more exciting, similar to the first XCOM where you're running along and you're not really, you're focused on this guy, and then all of a sudden random sectoid comes out from the corner that you didn't see and blasts you. It would just add a lot more gameplay variety, I think, rather than running in a straight line, trying to not activate pods. And in essence, it also makes melee units weaker than they should be, because a lot of times you won't go up in melee, because if you do, you'll probably activate the next group of enemies, and then you're going to have to deal with more enemies at once. The other thing that I really want to see, and it kind of ties into that, is I want to see bigger squad counts. We've seen this work through the Long War mods. I have not played Long War directly, but I'm almost positive they allow for more than 6-person squads, and they even dabbled with it a tiny bit in War of the Chosen, where there's a chance you'll randomly get some bonus soldiers. Based on some of the various bonuses that you can get in the game. I really want to see this for a few different reasons. One, I think it would allow for my aforementioned, mechanic to make more sense, where the enemies can freely move and interact with XCOM without having to see them first. But I also think they've gotten to this point where they're introducing too many classes. Some of them just can't be involved. By the end of War of the Chosen, you're going to have access to 9 different unit types. 9. And your max soldier count is 6. Probably 5 out of those 6 are locked to soldiers that... probably 6 out of those 6 soldiers are locked to... I probably should bring, each of the hero classes, specialist for a medic, shotgun guy, and the last person could be a wild card, but let's be honest, it's going to be a Psi unit, because Psi units are cheesy bullcrap. So it just kind of leaves everything else out in the dust, and you don't really get a chance to play. I mean, in an optimal team situation, you're probably not going to play with those classes much, and all the classes have something to offer, and I would love to at least bring one of everyone along on a mission. It's a shame that the squad size is so reduced, and I really think they could have done it for War of the Chosen, but it's clear that they really didn't want to have to rebalance too much. And to be fair, yeah, that would have risked really ruining the balance of the original game, which is not bad by any means, and I get it. Although, to be honest, everything got a lot easier in War of the Chosen because of that. In general, those are the 2 big things I want to see change. I don't know if that'll happen. I'm sure an XCOM 3 is inevitable, but I really do think that would spice up the game. And not only that, but get it even closer back to its roots of having large squads and large-scale encounters, while still retaining the feel of new XCOM, where it doesn't feel quite as bullshit when you get attacked, because you'll still have so many options. The problem is, for the small squad size, you have so many options in War of the Chosen that most of the time enemies don't even get to take a turn. They don't even get to shoot once, because you'll kill them the second they show up, and I think that's a real problem. And I think larger squad sizes on both sides and getting rid of this pod mechanic would help with that tremendously. So yeah, XCOM, baby. It's a great franchise. Highly recommend you check out both. If you haven't checked out the first reboot either, it's not bad to go back and play that. I know I never did a review / thoughts on that. At least I don't think I did. But that's also a blast, but it's really hard to go back to if you've played XCOM 2. That's all I can really say. So until then, thank you guys so much for watching. If you somehow made it to this point, damn, thank you. Until next time, thank you guys so much. Later, everyone.